why do you think, even though BGS is older than CGC, they have kind of like failed to keep up with the other two people, especially a newer one and then an older one such as PSA?
The ownership of BGS is kind of happy with the status quo. And I've had a lot of friends who tried to kind of push the Pokemon sort of segment forward with BGS, and they've got a lot of pushback, as in like, we just want to grade sports cards, we don't want to grade Pokemon cards. Like direct conversation from someone that did try to build something with them at a pretty substantial volume.
Ladies and gentlemen, to episode 8 of the NextGen TCG Podcast. As always, I am your host and moderator, Tetra Ninja, Nick. And as always, I also have my co-host with me, the Shelva man known as Zack Browning, who has had... Zack lives in Nashville, so he had a late night last night, as everyone can probably tell. Is there anything you can share with the fine people of the NextGen TCG Podcast of what you were doing last night?
It's Music City. There's all kinds of great live music, and we just want to go, show our support and entertain all the guests and all the visitors that want to come see Nashville. So we just like to be great stewards and great hosts.
So for all of you unaware, Nashville is the bachelorette capital of the United States. That's where all the bachelor parties are being held now. It used to be Vegas, but Vegas became a little bit expensive, and now Nashville is kind of like the go-to spot for bachelorette parties. So if you're a single guy, maybe you don't want to be single, or you're just looking for a fun time, maybe just mosey yourself down to Nashville. You can meet up with Zack. Zack is an amazing host. He'll probably show you a good time around the city, and he'll probably take you to Tootsie's and all that fun stuff. But I have a new game since Zack has now gone full-time into the Pokemon hobby. It's going to be called Where in the World is Zack? kind of a play on Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. But Zack, you want to tell us where you're going this week for your job and where your adventures are taking you?
Yeah, so last week, I think you guys know, I was at Heritage, picking up some stuff, and then made a trip down to Florida for a little bit. And then this week, I'm going back to Dallas for kind of a really cool product offering we're putting together for the market, mostly the live streamer market. So I'm personally kind of working on that for a couple of days. Have some help, some pillars in the Pokemon hobby that you guys may be aware of. And then we're going to the National on Wednesday. So it's the biggest sports card show in the world by far. We've talked about this a few times, but they're actually running the entire Donald E. Stevens arena. And it is going to be like insane. And there's actually not a lot of Pokemon there, but there's so many people, so many just celebrities, athletes, just all the big vendors, they'll all be there in full force, and it'll be a great time.
So you told me like one thing of the National that they're doing is they're actually doing in-person grading day of, and you probably just drop off your cards and maybe pick them up by the end of the show, and you're actually getting a bunch of cards recased as well, because you have been collecting for a while now. I've been collecting since 2016, so we have a lot of cards still in the original PSA cases without any of the up-to-date security systems that they have now. So I have a bunch of cards that don't have any sort of holographic on them as well. Then they introduced the Lighthouse stamp, and then they also added the fugitive ink, and that's pretty much the modern day PSA card. So you're actually getting some big cards graded. So you want to talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, I have one of my first Edge base sets I bought a long time ago. They're all in the older cases, and some of the really old cases are super thin and skinny. And then, they upgraded to like a little bit of a thicker case, and then, they added the Lighthouse label. And there's actually a lot of changes sort of in between the PSA cases that you may not be aware of, that PSA will tell you if you ask, but they sometimes keep a lot of those different things private. And then Nat Turner, in a recent interview with PK of Pokemon Knowledge, said that they actually changed the cases again to where they're 20% heavier. They've been doing that on sports cards recently, and they're eventually going to roll it out to all the cards, where it ultimately has a few extra security features that we're not even aware of. And so with that being said, I'd actually on Saturday I went to my safety deposit boxes and I went through every one of them because we had that conversation last week, and you were talking about just kind of checking them, the humidity, this and that, and like I always take all the precautions and make sure everything's good. But I went through every card just to double check, make sure that there weren't any issues. Sort of compiling. You don't want to leave them go. You don't want to let them go unchecked for too long. And then while I was there, I basically pulled out one of the first ed base sets and realized it probably needs to get recased. So I'm not bringing all the cards, just the 16 hollows. Go to the PSA booth, and then for the Charizard, they're going to charge like $250 in person. And then the rest of the cards are going to charge $150 each in person. That's the lowest that they do for the recasing. And so for me, like to not have to ship, like I know like Leonhardt had a big issue with the Charizard. He shipped a PSA a couple years ago. It's just, if you can go get it done in person, you can come back. And then like literally I have a flight where I can go put it directly back into my safety deposit box right when I get home. But there's a lot of people that actually wait for the National every year just because that service is offered, and it's same day. You do it within an hour, 24 hours or so. But I mean, would you ever think about doing that, Tetra?
I like the cases, the new cases, how they are right now. I like all the security features. I'm just like curiosity. Like, do you find that the newer cases like would drive a premium just for the convenience of like buyers? If you had like an old cert and you put it in a new case, is that more desirable to potential buyers?
I think if you directly look at it, I would almost say like it's not a tremendous like factor, but there are some like ancillary factors you may not think of like right away. And so some of the old cases, if you have it, it may get scratched up, or it may just not look as appealing, or this or that. Or sometimes, when I sleeve a card, I don't sleeve a card till I sell it. Like I don't sleeve everything and then wait a year. I sleeve it the moment it sells. That way it looks really clean and crisp. And so when you do see kind of a fresh case, it does look clean. It does look perfect. Like that's going to be more attractive to a buyer. But when I am buying a card online, if it's a card I need, like I personally don't really care what case it's in, because in my head to go get it recased or something is a very nominal cost. If I'm doing a couple cards at once or a batch or something, it's like 10 to, well, it's not $10 anymore, but it might be like in my head, like 20 to, $30 or $40 per card. Whereas if you go to the National, it is a little bit more, but like in my head, I only add sort of that much to it if it's an old case and needs to be recased.
Yeah, I would love to. Maybe next year I'll go, and then maybe we can do kind of like a in-person like documentary series of like it getting recased, because I have to start going to these events, and I think that'd be some interesting content that people would be watching, or getting an entire first edition base set recase. I personally think that'd be a cool video to produce, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's one thing that like. There was one time of cards from PSA where the label I wasn't too fond of. Is, you remember that period of time where like the label over time actually became a little bit crinkled, kind of like it had them and they like needed to be steamed or ironed. That's basically the only time where I would probably think that like I wasn't too fond of the PSA label.
Yeah, I mean the labels, they come on a piece of paper or what have you, and they basically peel them. They kind of, they flip them over, and so that they stick to each other. So it's kind of, I don't know if it's automated or manual, but like if you've ever cracked a PSA case and you pull the label out, it's literally just like a piece of paper folded in half, and that's how it's sort of put together. But no, the Lighthouse labels are cool. They're that shiny plastic. They kind of, I still feel like they aren't as cool as like the CGC, like pristine tin, label. But at the same time, it's plain, it's white. And a lot of the people that do collect, you focus on the card itself, not the label. And so I think that's why a lot of companies are making the labels more plain. The black label for BGS sticks out. The CGC 10 label sticks out. But the rest of the labels, they really just want to focus on the card and not actually the grade.
First of all, I think like judging from the fact that the overall design of the PSA label has pretty much remained the same since the first ever graded card with the Honus Wagner, the very infamous card from PSA. So I think that's just kind of a testament that like they did a pretty good job of designing something that is pretty appealing to the masses. You're talking about the pristine label. Yes, I agree. That's a beautiful label. But you have to keep in mind that literally just came out in 2023, whereas you had PSA cards coming out in like the 90s. So I think it's a good in terms of like retrospective analysis. I think it just shows like the PSA level has overall is pretty well designed. You just also talked about like mitigating risk. You said that like it's $250 to recase a Charizard in person, which I would absolutely pay all day, because that's probably how much I would have to pay just to ship the card to PSA. Insurance, overnight, FedEx, all that good stuff. Because you have to go with FedEx. You can't use, in the case of like, I think it's USPS, there's like a $50,000 limit on something you can insure a card on. So you actually have to use like a third party service such as FedEx. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's the case. So you have to go through FedEx, and then just like the stress levels, it getting tied up in customs. I know that Mosin had a card regraded, a Zard PSA 10 first edition Zard regraded. Basically, what happened was his card was just so public and the certain number was out there so often that what happened was scammers were just actually just reusing that certification and those pictures from his posts on social media, basically put up fake listings pretty much everywhere and trying to get some people who weren't basically see a good deal, not realizing it's too good to be true sort of situation. So PSA actually invalidated his certification on his PSA Zard and basically said, we're going to invalidate your cert. If you want it to be valid, you have to resend us the card. We'll give you, the grade will stay the same, but we'll give you a new cert. And he lives in the UK. So what happened was when he shipped it over, obviously you have the danger of shipping a card across the pond. And also the fact the first time that they sent it back to him, he got dinged on customs for the full insurance value of the card. Also, he had to go through like a middle person as well. So there's just so many layers of issues that you can run into there. So to be able to just literally purchase a plane ticket to fly to the National and pay $250 to recase one of the most expensive cards in the hobby, I think it's worth its weight in gold, basically.
But you wouldn't fly, would you? You'd have to drive, or else you'd have to go to O'Hare.
I'd fly to JFK and then drive to Chicago.
Oh, dude, no. There's no way that's way too long of a drive.
My issues with Chicago is that I would never do a layover in Chicago. If my final destination is Chicago, then that's fine. But I will never do a layover in Chicago because bags go missing and the airport's just way too big. So anyway, that's where Zach's going to be this week, like hopping on. I wonder how many air mile points do you have?
It's I don't know. I used to travel a lot for work and consulting and stuff before this, and so it builds up a lot. And the cool part is, you always pay for the main class or the main cabin, and then because you travel more than others, if there's like an open upgrader seat, they usually just give it to you. And so it's like a lot of times I'm paying the same price as everyone else in the flight, but sometimes you just get kind of cool perks and stuff. I would say the coolest perk is they'll come up to you like on the flight. They'll say, "Hey, Mr. Browning, how are you doing?" And it's like, it feels a little weird because there's a lot of people around and they're just like, they're calling me out. And I'm like, okay, like, cool. I'm doing good. Thank you for the ice water. I will say a lot of times when I do fly in the front, I get like ice water instead of like an alcoholic drink or something. I just want to rehydrate. You got to stay hydrated on the road. If not, you're going to crush. You're going to fail.
I feel like that's like a scene, like if you're like in a strip club and like the stripper, I'm not trying to degrade like flight attendants, but I just feel like you have like the lady like taking you by the arm and kind of like escorting you to the champagne room.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Oh yeah. Let's move into market trends. So first thing we need to know, because of Zach's travel schedule and the fact that he is leaving basically today, we normally record on Monday, but because Zach's traveling, in order to get the home setup quality, we are recording on Sunday night. So we're actually going to be missing out on the PWCC Poncho Screen Pika auctions that occur every week. That's basically all PWCC is these days, right? Just Poncho and Screen Pikas.
I mean, Chalk had a really good post earlier where he was talking about the Mimikyu, how it went kind of like from 5K to 10K, June 4th. Then now it's back down to 5K. And so I think Pika's kind of has that stronger sort of presence and brand. But at the same time, Mimikyu is always harder to get. And so, if you follow the trend, you try to see see where it's going to be at. I literally think it's probably going to come back down to kind of peak Japanese. But again, we won't know. You guys will know when you see this. So we'll see how close it is, if it continues to rise or it continues to fall.
I was actually I was surprised because I was monitoring the auctions last week and there was no Poncho Pikachus and there was some screen promos, but there were no Poncho Pikas. I was just like, is it that time where people have finally decided that it's time to just hold the Poncho Pikas? But people are still selling into the hype right now, which you should be. Sell into that wave of hype. So although we're going to miss the PWCC auctions, we did have the ending of the rare candy auctions that finish every Saturday. And definitely the highlight of the rare candy auctions yesterday was the Snap Chansey that finished off basically 41,500. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. We value the baseline for the majority of the Snap cards to be around that $50,000 mark. This one just finished a little bit lower, PSA 8. What do you think?
I mean, I was really surprised. I mean, Chansey's, it's an iconic card. I mean, there's a lot of Chansey fans out there, kind of similar to like Vaporeon. You have a ton of Vaporeon fans out there, a ton of Pikachu fans. And so for the Chansey to go a little bit lower, I thought it was one of the stronger cards. It did have that 8 grade, so I think this is a market telling us, hey, we do value the grade in the Snap conversation per se. But some of the primary Chansey collectors that would love this card already have the card, and so you do lose a little bit of that demand, sort of pushing the market up. When you saw that high Gyarados sale, the 9.5 with Heritage kind of crush, it makes you think like maybe the Chansey would have been somewhere in between like 60, 70, because again, there's so few of these cards. I think the grade is kind of irrelevant. And so I was actually very surprised at the 41, but it also tells you the coffee that went, the 9.5 that went for basically like 50 or 49 or so. There was probably a premium built into that because of the grade.
Yeah. So you talked about like there's like specific species collectors, but you kind of have to recognize like even with rarity and like popular species, we're still at that price bracket where there's just some people who just, even though like they're diehard Chansey fans, that's just another tax bracket that we're not part of right now. So that's probably another indication, like even though there are like the demand is there, it's just like the ability to purchase is not there basically.
Yeah, like Heritage and Rare Candy, they're going to make you like show proof of funds, and so Rare Candy you can't bid over 7,500 unless you could show. Whereas PWCC, if I have a bunch of cards in my vault and then I decide, hey, there's a card that I want, you could leverage off that card, and not leverage in the sense of like you're going to take a loan and pay it back, but almost in the sense of, oh, I'd rather have this $40,000 Snap Chansey in my collection. I'm okay with selling these other cards. And so the way to do that is you would literally just take the cards you're okay with giving up to buy this Chansey. You'd send them to auction, and there's a lot of auction houses that'll do cash advances. And so they'll give you up to 50% of kind of the fair market value. And so anytime an auction house offers a cash advance, I'd recommend taking that right away. It's free money. It's interest free on something you're going to sort of let go. And so let's say I didn't have the 40K or whatever, and you send $50,000 of it to auction, you get 25K right away, and you can put that towards paying for the Chansey and sort of that window that you have. But I don't think Rare Candy offers that just yet. Might be something they could consider in the future, but that may have contributed to, like not everyone's extremely liquid in the hobby. So when you do buy something really cool, sometimes you have to give up something else that's really cool that you may have already owned. And it's hard to do that at the same time when, if you're not ready for that auction.
Yeah, I think they need to just like keep working on building out the platform a little bit more. And like you said, you can't really beat the fact that you can leverage, and with PWCC, you can leverage your current vault space and your current vault collection and get basically advances. So
and Heritage will let you do that. Golden will let you do that. A lot of the different auction houses will let you do that. I do like the idea of like Rare Candy. Like when you think like Rare Candy, like level up, like +1, like you got like
level up.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's like level up auctions. I don't know. I thought it was. I never really thought about it. I was like, oh, Rare Candy, but it really, it's kind of like a free, treat, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about, Zach, is I want to know, where did all the Charizards go at $250,000? Because I monitor the fixed listings for PWCC a lot, and like a couple months ago, I just noticed there were like a ton of Charizards in the fixed vault. So you had a couple at like the top of the highest point selling at like 420,000 with the buyer's premium, but you also had like a healthy supply of Charizards at around the 2 to 2.25 to 2.5 thousand range. And then I just jumped on the other day, and I noticed like all the Charizards around that 200,000 to 250,000. They're all gone. they are no longer there. I think you mentioned it a couple times that there have been a couple of private deals that taken place with Charizards around that price bracket. So give me your insider knowledge. Where did all the Charizards go for $250,000?
Oh man, it's one of those cases where there's so much that happens in the private market with these things. Like all the different auction houses will basically deal privately if you have a need or a deal and it's worth the time, and they kind of have preset fees for different things. And so there was a point over probably like the last maybe year where Charizards were struggling to move at 150. Privately, it was like, hey, can anyone pay 150? And that buyer is going to get less because the auction house is going to take their fee. And then in the last probably couple months, several have moved in that $200,000 range. And then, of course, we saw the buy it now in PWCC for $250. And last time I checked, it was payment sort of pending. So maybe that payment did go through. But that would be kind of a killer sort of mark. I did have one of the Zards up of my own up there, but I had it listed for like 300, and I knew that they were struggling to sell privately for 150. So in my head, like, hey, if someone's paid 300, sure, like I'll go get one of the other ones at 150. But actually, when PWCC switched ownership back in May, I actually pulled that out. And so sometimes when things switch ownership, you just, there's some growing pains and different things like that. So I just wanted to kind of take everything in-house and just have total control. And so when the PWCC Vault initially came out, it's such a, I thought it was a killer product, great selling point. Like it made sense to just send everything, but you also put a lot of faith that company's going to be there and they're going to, kind of keep everything protected. So I would never go all your eggs in one basket with any company, no matter how good it sounds, whether that's, eBay Vault or, the Collector's Vault or PWCC Vault. And so I just thought there was a little bit more sort of risk with the change of ownership. And I pulled one of the Charizards you're referencing. I pulled down and I have it saved $2,000 here.
Yeah, the PWCC Vault it's such a great idea, especially if you can take advantage of the fact that you don't have to pay any sort of taxes on the card, especially when you're talking like we're talking about $250,000 card. Taxes are a big deal. Taxes are a big deal when you're talking about those types of cards. So the fact that they're in a tax-free state is amazing. But I actually started sending. We're going to talk about this a little bit later with our main topic about like competition in the market and how that it drives, basically makes things more consumer friendly. So initially, when you submitted cards to the PWC Vault, if you were getting cards from getting them shipped directly from eBay, they were charging like a fee to first like take in the card and then store the card. Then you're taking insurance fees. So that was for a while. That was going on for a while. But it's a funny thing when eBay opened their vault system, you notice that they stopped charging those fees, at least for the foreseeable future or in the near future anyways. So it's kind of, it's really amazing how competition works, right?
Well, you get all the cards in-house, and basically you have some sort of deferred revenue that's going to occur at some point in the future. And so you pull the card out of the vault, you get a 1% sort of fulfillment fee. You sell the card to the platform, you get sort of whatever fees are associated with that card and that level. And so the key is get everything in-house. Don't worry about, you want to remove the barriers to entry. You want to remove all the challenges that keep people from actually getting it in the door, because everything that comes in the door is some sort of revenue that's going to occur at some point in the future down the road. And so the zero vault fees kind of in perpetuity actually made a ton of sense. I thought it'd be cool to even just pay like a little bit because it made a lot of sense to me. But, it seems like the marketing and sort of strategy was, if we get as much in the door as we can, we at least have some sort of future revenue that'll occur at some point in the future.
So I'm unfamiliar with the eBay Vault because I actually sent my first ever card. I bought some cards this past weekend, and I, for the first time ever, sent the cards to the eBay Vault just to kind of like gauge of like how the entire process works. I like how eBay system is. You can see everything in your vault in real time, and eBay in general is a lot easier to navigate than the PWCC site, which makes sense because they've been around for so much longer. Once again, they're also doing basically no storage fees. I think they've listed it up until 2024, where the fees, where they're waiving fees. So I just kind of, since I'm so new to it, can you want to give me your kind of like thoughts on like the eBay Vault and your experience with it? Have you used it, and general thoughts?
Yeah, I do have to be a little careful. I have talked to the eBay team, so I can share sort of what's out there publicly. But eBay's kind of they're going to offer they're building out their product every day, and so right now you can only submit to the eBay Vault if you're sort of an approved customer. I know like Dan Got to Catch 'Em All is approved, and a couple other people, and so you can kind of submit to the eBay Vault through them. They do a minimum of, I think it's $250 per card or $500 per card. I think it depends, but the package that you send has to be so much value, and the cards have to all sort of hit a higher tier. And I think that's tied to the eBay authenticity guarantee, and so every card that goes into the vault has to be basically authenticated, to make sure it's in a real PSA case or CGC case or BGS case. And then it goes into the vault. So they are taking all those extra steps on the way. And eBay seems to take a very sort of conservative, like no risk approach. If you have any mishaps or mistakes early on, it could really kill a product. And so I think they're taking their time, kind of like where Katie's not bringing on every live streamer here, there, everywhere. Like eBay Vault's kind of saying, hey, let's just only get approved people. Let's do this the right way. And so there's actually very, very few people that can even submit to the vault. And then when you see things in the vault and you buy off of it, you can actually put it directly into your own eBay Vault. So while you can't submit directly, if you buy off something and you put it in the vault, it actually, you could have your vault and build it that way.
They're just so big. eBay is just too big, man. It's so not too big, but it's just so big. So I'm sure they're gonna, there's like in terms of like a business strategy, that they have some more stuff underneath their sleeves. So let's move into our main topic based on the fact that we were just talking about competition in the market. So our main topic for this week is grading service competition and kind of where we stand on it right now. So for the longest time, especially in Pokemon, we kind of had like this divide. Basically, the majority of PSA cards are Pokemon cards, and the majority of sports cards were being submitted to BGS, Magic the Gathering as well, generally more of a BGS thing. But more recently, even though it's been a couple of years now, but just in terms of like the macro level, a couple of years is nothing in terms of a hobby. We saw the emergence of CGC as well as very recently their rebranding and kind of like the competition aspect that's added to the market. And this is something, since you're so knees deep into the air market of air cards, let's talk about how basically CGC has kind of shaped the way the PSA has done business as of late.
Yeah, I mean, CGC's kind of led the frontier and sort of grading errors, labeling them, just kind of catering to that market. I think I realize, PSA, error cards are sort of frowned upon in the sports card world, and it's like kind of seen as like less value. Like there's some cards in the same grade, if it's an error, will be like a third of the value, and that's very consistent across a ton of sports. And so PSA for the longest time kind of never really saw it as like having a huge demand or something for Pokemon, and Pokemon's are fastest growing category. At some point in the future may even be bigger than sports, as is. That's a quote from Nat Turner from the Pokemon Knowledge podcast he did earlier this week. And so it's one of those things where, because CGC started kind of catering to that market, a lot of the error collectors just sent everything there. And there's so many cool errors, and CGC has their process to authenticate and validate and do that stuff, that PSA eventually kind of stepped up and said, hey, we're losing this, these people. That's kind of a piece of the market that's not coming through. And so PSA has been more open to grading errors, this and that. I mean, for the longest time, no damage Ninetales. Just they wouldn't put the label on it. And there's so many others that it's like we pushed for years and years, emails back and forth from me, from Rusty, from everyone trying to get PSA. Just, it was challenging, but it took that competition to sort of drive the hobby forward. And so when you do see kind of a company come out and take a leap of faith, they do something a little more risky, or they do take that step, I'm all for it pretty much every single time it happens, because it pushes the hobby forward. It's a positive thing that kind of forces the hobby to grow and expand. Whereas we struggled to get PSA to do this, and now PSA is doing quite a bit of it. And now some error collectors are sending cards back to PSA. But at the same time, I did submit my errors to CGC, last week, and I got some of them back, and it's kind of cool. So like one of the cards came back as an authentic. I was like, okay, well, that's good to know, and so it's like you do kind of want to go through that process and those steps. But I think it's great overall to kind of see the whole hobby go forward.
You hear that, PSA registry team? You missed out on grading Zach's infamous amount of error cards because too slow. Too slow to the market. Yeah, man. It's just I remember when a couple years ago, like it was so hard to get qualifiers for
Mm-hmm.
PSA, like especially in like the like some of the niche stuff like Cigar Streak, like Hitmonlees, and then as well as like even off center cards are like ridiculously off center that, and you could see like the print dots on like the cards where it was just like an obvious miscut, and they're just so off centered. It was so difficult to get a qualifier on a card. So I'm glad like the fact that like CGC is around gives another outlet for people to an option to get cards. And I think it's just bad business if you see the majority, like even though I'm not a huge error card person, I find like it's still kind of cool to look at error card. I was actually on eBay today just looking at some general error cards, just like holofoil errors, and trend I noticed is that they're all in CGC cases, which is not good for business if you're with PSA. So I think like PSA still has to adapt a little bit faster to the market, what the market is telling them, where the collectors are basically.
I think one really cool thing with a lot of the errors and the names and such, like you mentioned Cigar Hitmonlee earlier, like it's like the name just kind of stuck. It's like it has nothing to do really with Cigar. You know what I mean? Like the foil wrapper that was on there, the initial one Gary had that he bought and sold three different times that he wishes he had back. We actually talked about it. Kansas City, that one card he used to own. It's like it's not like has nothing to do with Cigar, but because people called it that for so long, it's like the name just kind of sticks. You know, for the Neo Revelation, you know, sort of a lot of people call them hollow bleeds, but they're not really hollow bleeds because you just have extra hollow. It's kind of like a double hollow. It's like an extra hollow layer, but still, like some people call them hollow bleeds, even though hollow bleeds are a totally separate category of errors. So over time, you kind of have these things that just, you know, the scratch error pincer. I remember like I was just calling it that because it looked like a little scratch. You know, the rainbow dragon error. It's like why does that name stick? And it's just, I think it's funny that we kind of had these names and the industry kind of just accepts them. And then now Hitmonlee is a cigar error. It's nothing to do with cigar, but yeah.
So we talk about like competition within all the grading services. Right now, we're just going to talk about the big three. There are obviously a bunch of other ones, but we're going to talk about PSA. We're going to talk about CGC, and then we're going to talk about BGS. So, based on like cards submitted on a weekly basis, PSA absolutely killing it. Just like basically like 80% of the market of graded cards every single week. Even though we talk like CGC relatively new, they're next in line, and then we have near basically the bottom we have BGS. So we said BGS really a dedicated sports market for getting your cards graded. So why do you think, even though BGS is older than CGC, they have kind of like failed to keep up with the other two people, especially a newer one and then an older one such as PSA?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a couple people about it, and I don't deal with BGS a whole lot at the same sort of levels that I deal with PSA or CGC at. So everything that I'm aware of with them is purely speculation, just kind of down the grapevine. So I just want to throw that out there before we dive into this conversation. But from what I'm aware, the ownership of BGS is kind of happy with the status quo. And I've had a lot of friends who tried to kind of push the Pokemon sort of segment for BGS, and they've got a lot of pushback, as in like, you know, we just want to grade sports cards, we don't want to grade Pokemon cards. Like direct conversation from someone that did try to build something with them at a pretty substantial volume. And, you know, I'm kind of on the forefront of trying to figure something out where we do have some more BGS kind of coming through, because there is some demand for it, but it really seems that people just want the black label, that everything else, not as much, because they are priced higher. They are, you know, it is more expensive to get things graded with them. The bulk rates of BGS, you know, are still higher than just kind of the standard rates at PSA. You do get a thicker case, a thicker slab. It is kind of like, it does feel like it's a premium sort of product when you look at it. You know, if you get the gold label, it's nice, but all the other labels sort of underneath are kind of like paper. They don't look as good. And, you know, it's one of those weird things where I think BGS is probably making a lot of money. They're probably doing well. And then, you know, you go 5 years in the future, they're still making a lot of money, they're still doing well, but it's like they could have made a whole lot more. They could have been a whole lot bigger. I think they just got really comfortable with the status quo, and rather than trying to explode and grow, I think PSA really, you know, they opened New Jersey office, you know, and Nat kind of said they're going to They opened the Japan office. They're going to open an office in the UK. And so PSA is really sort of taking that revenue and saying, hey, how do we maximize it to kind of give the collectors what we want? How do we increase capacity? And I'm not, you rarely, I feel like, hear stuff in the news about BGS.
There was like rumors like several years ago about PSA Canada in like downtown Toronto, and I like, oh God, please, please, because my cards not having to cross the border would be just it would be my wet dream. Basically, it would be the greatest thing ever. And I think like even though we're literally like we only have like 30 million people in Canada versus 300 million people in the United States. There's some collectors in Canada who would just don't feel comfortable like mailing out the cards or paying custom fees on your cards coming back again. And it's just if they could make it happen, it would honestly be like my dream come true, basically.
So there's some collectors in Canada. I'm gonna keep going back to this interview. Like if you haven't seen the interview in that turn, you got to watch it, because in the interview he named Canada as one of the primary places they're looking. So they have the UK, which they're probably going to push soon, and Canada's like he called it out by country. He said we'd love to have an office in Canada and where you could have a grading facility in Canada and get everything taken care of. So that's literally something that he released like this week, which is kind of cool.
I've been hearing about that for like 5 years, man. So I'm not going to believe it until they get shovels in the ground. I don't believe you, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we talk about like just like Beckett and like their like niche in the hobby of Pokemon. Anyways, so you said it yourself. Like with Pokemon, especially with Beckett, it's either the pristine label or bust. Basically, the 9.5s generally sell typically a lot lower than the PSA 10s do. And what you find is generally the people who are looking into buying 9.5s are basically just trying to find a way to do it like a cross over grade into PSA 10. That's kind of like a low risk play basically for a very high reward if you can actually get the crossover. So you want to talk about like Beckett's willingness to like do over crossover grades to PSA 10, and generally if you've had an experience trying to pull off that play.
Painful experiences. So the industry term a lot of people will call this is slab optimization, and so
that's so good.
I know, right? Slab optimization.
Good. Oh, yeah. Who coined that one?
I wish I could name them, but it's just what a lot of people are using now. I wish there was like a mother, where it all came from, but. Okay. There's some people that have been doing that over the years. Some people that have been in the hobby longer than others have done it. Gary was always kind of opposed to it. I was a little more opposed to it too, because I think we were just, I don't want to say we were like pure, or maybe we were just like ignorant, or maybe we just didn't realize the opportunity there. But in my opinion, like when I sent a card, this is my opinion years ago, if I sent a card and I got a grade, it's like, okay, that's the grade. But in reality, you have to remember, these are humans, are subjective. Most of the grading is objective, but there is a subjective sort of component to it that just change from time to time. And so if you do get a card that's misgraded or undergraded or overgraded, you could send it to another company and try to optimize. And so for the longest time, it was BGS and PSA, those two going back and forth. And, CGC is kind of another option as well too. And we continue to talk about, the PSA 9 Zard is like 18,000, the 10 is 250,000, and there's a lot of gap in between. And so if you can optimize the slabs, which I'd say in the last 2 years is taken off like a storm. There's so many people that are literally only buying a card to optimize it. And I think they're making a lot of money. There's a lot of value there, but I think it's just crazy how it's prevalent. It's prevalent, and it's very widespread at this point.
We're going to talk about first. There's two basic ways to do a crossover. You can either send the card in directly in whatever case that you currently have, and then you will just send it to whatever new company you want, and they'll grade it in the case. And then there's also the second option of removing the card from its current case, cracking the card, basically, it's what it's called. So you have basically, you're removing any biases to the grader or to the next grader of basically where this card in terms of quality, in terms of condition is going to be. So we've talked about this privately. So how many cards have you resubmitted to PSA in its current case that actually have gotten an upgrade?
I had one order in 2016 where I sent 30 cards, and 15 of them were crossed over in the case. And then the last 3 years, I've probably spent $5,000 on maybe 10 to 15 different orders. in the case, and not one of them has come back with an upgrade. And so that's literally money just thrown down the drain. And when we talk about, slab optimization, this at its core, what a lot of people are doing is they're buying a PSA 9 and they're sending it to BGS to try to get a 9.5 or CGC to get a 9.5, or they're buying a CGC 10 or a CGC Pristine 10 or a BGS 9.5 with good subgrades. It looks really, really good in the case, and they're sending it to PSA to try to get that PSA 10. Now, you can also take a PSA 9 and you can send it back to PSA and say, hey, can I get a 10? And so you can do it with the same grading company, or you can do it between grading companies. But the goal is sort of to take a card and try to get one level higher. And sometimes people even send a BGS 9 to PSA and say min grade PSA 9 just to get a PSA 9 because they want in the PSA case. And so a lot of times when we're talking about that, we that's what we mean. And so to go back to Tetra's question of, do you submit in the case or do you crack out? I will say, without a doubt, you should always crack it out. That rhymed. I didn't mean for it to. But no, but you crack it out because you put it in the case, you take the bias away. And Nat Turner and PSA have come out and said it's very hard to look in a case and know if it should be upgraded. So we will only crack it out unless we are 100% sure that it should receive that upgrade. And again, when you're going to a 10 grade, like, that's a pretty good looking card. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good looking. If they have any doubt, it's just, they don't crack it out. But at the same time, to me, it's easy. If you're that grader, you get it. Oh, not a PSA 10. It's quick. It's like, I don't know. I feel like if you send a card back to the same company at PSA, they should crack it out, and then they should send it back through. And then if it doesn't hit the whatever, just put it back in the original case. When the bias is there, it just makes no sense.
So just to reiterate this fact, Zack has submitted cards for possible cross upgrading basically to PSA 0 for 30. 0 for 30. He basically just burned $5,000 of money that he will never get back ever again. Yeah, that's his history. A person who has submitted a lot, knows a lot of the idiosyncrasies of the hobby. So basically, don't submit your cards for upgrades in the case. The only way to do it is just to crack it out yourself, just so you remove some of the inherent biases. So on the flip side, how many times have you cracked out a card out of its case, sent it in, fresh new submission, and how many times have you actually gotten the upgrade that you wanted?
I would say that's a much higher percentage, like 60 to 70% of the time. Because, a lot of people that don't crack a card out of the case, which is what I sort of did 3 years ago, or the last 3 years, is because I didn't want to damage a card. Different cases react differently. And so again, PSA, we talked earlier, has changed their case over the years. There's some cases you do a little thing, it pops right out. There's some cases you do the same thing and then it shatters the case. And it's like, then you're pulling little pieces of plastic over your hollow foil. And it's kind of scary until you get really comfortable with how different cases do this or that. It's not the easiest. And Nat Turner with the 20% heavier slab said these new ones are actually really hard to crack out. And so they're going to make it even more challenging to do that in the future. So with the cases being a little bit heavier, they are harder to crack out. And so in the past, when you look back, some of the earlier 2-certs a little bit easier. There's kind of a 4-cert era that was kind of easy, and some of the more recent ones a little bit harder. I'd say I probably cracked out like 300 to 400 cards. And I would say maybe 100 to 150 of those were literally cards that were like PSA 4, 5, 6, 7. And I just want them in a binder. I like flipping through a binder. I like seeing 9 cards on a page or 12 cards on a page. But those other 200 or so that I've cracked out, again, I'm only cracking them out if I think there's a chance to be upgraded. It's a card I think is strong. Like, I'm not cracking out maybes. I'm cracking out like what I think is this should be upgraded. This should go from 8 to 9. This should go from 9 to 10, or a 9 to CDC 10, or 9 to BGS 9.5. And so that percentage is much, much higher. Around 70% is what I'd say for myself. And then the other 30%, if I send it back in once, I paid that grading fee twice. A lot of times I'm like, okay, that's the grade. Let me just stick to it. And a lot of times when you look at cards, you like to look at edges and corners. If you see a little nick here and there, like, okay, clearly that has a little damage. Maybe it shouldn't be. But there are a lot of surface issues sort of on the front and the back that you kind of can only see at an angle. So if you get a nice light in, you see, that may be why that card's not a 10. Perfect edges, perfect corner, but a little surface scratching on the back that doesn't really pop like the hollow foil would pop if it has a scratch, but kind of other surface areas. I've actually seen cards not get to 10 because of that. So again, the grader, they're looking at the card. They have kind of all the things they have to look at. A lot of times as the end user, then collector, we kind of just look for the things that are the easy, quick tells, but there are other tells on the card too that you have to consider.
I actually do want to do like you said, there's like a lot, especially with the new cases. There's even though it seems like it'd be an easy thing to do, there are a bunch of nuances to cracking a case. That's a video I think that we should probably do of how to do one correctly, especially with the new cases. I'm actually, spoiler alert, I'm actually planning a trip to Nashville to see Zack sometime in the near future, and I have like a whole bunch of videos planned that we can kind of like record while we're there, just so we'll be there at the same time. Probably do a podcast in Nashville as well. So just planning out some content that we can possibly do. So that's something, how to properly crack a PSA case safely, or BGS is like. BGS is like the most difficult case to crack just because they're so thick. Have you ever cracked a BGS case?
I have, and man, you need some big pliers. You need like some leverage, and you need Slowpoke on your team. I'll say that.
You need, it's with the BGS case. Usually with like the PSA case, you can snap pretty clean with one single squeeze, but it's slow and steady with the BGS case. You just gotta like kind of like chip away at it very just steadily, and don't try to do it in one gigantic swoop. Or you can do the Poke Radar thing and just like open a case by snapping it against a staircase, because I saw a video of him doing that once.
The BGS case takes a lot of force, but the easy part about BGS is they have a sleeve inside, so the card's protected. So when you crack a PSA case, the card's loose, and you got to figure out how to get it out without damaging it. But a BGS case, you can use a lot of force and open it up, and the card basically like won't get scratched because it does have that inner sleeve.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of BGS is like that sleeve you talk about. It's also not only kind of like protects the card a little bit, it's also a UV resistant sleeve. So it's something that in terms of like protecting the card on the inside, it's a big plus if you're going to BGS. And just to kind of like wrap up on BGS, they do still have one corner of the market where they are, as of right now, with the changes to CGC, they are the only grading company that will tell you that offers a perfect card designation with the black label, the quad 10s. Generally, like we talked about before, it's mostly in terms of Pokemon cards that are coming out of Japan, just because their print quality in Japan, just like their cars, just like Japanese cars and car engines, they're pretty much bulletproof in terms of print quality. So that's where you'll see the majority of BGS 10 quad black labels coming out of.
Moving into our next segment is Collector's Corner, and we have something kind of unique this week that I picked up a couple weeks ago, and this is not a trading card, not an error card. I mean, it's crazy. It's not an error card this week, but
it's not an error card. Thank God, it's not an error card. Yeah, I love you, Zach, but I was getting a little bit tired of error cards.
I'm getting tired. Error cards are cool. Man. But no, this item is something that for years, like for 2 years or so, I tried to pick up. I couldn't pick up, and eventually ended up getting sort of a third place sort of copy. And then one of the winners or one of the champions reached out, and I actually was able to pick up the Pikachu first place trophy from the World Championships in 2014. And so you can see the World Champion 2014, the Pika with the gold trophy. It's so sick, so beautiful. And when you see one of these in person, it's unreal, like how cool this is.
Was 2014 the first year they swapped to the full art cards?
It was
for the design. Yeah, so that card is literally like that design is literally on the card itself that the winner would have received. It's been a while. Like they're still using that full art design. I was surprised it's actually lasted this long. We're up until 2023, so like a decade later, they're still doing full art designs for the cards, and pretty much the model has remained the same. So I love that card. It's a beautiful card. I'm just we always have like these eras, like the original Pika trophies, and then you have the half art ones. Then we moved into the full art ones. So that is a very that's a big get. So kind of like, so just talk about like the deal process and basically how it took place.
Yeah, they to go back to your trophy conversation, they kept the force the same. A lot of people thought in 2022 they were going to change it for London Worlds because there was that gap where you went in 2019 DC, then you kind of had a couple years of that Worlds, and then 2022 people thought it was going to change. It didn't, but they did change the trophies. So the trophies, they no longer have these trophies out there. They're sort of defined and they're locked in. They're not going to make any more of these, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so it's the trophy did change this year. We'll see if they change a trophy or the card. I'd be surprised if they change a trophy, but if they change a card, I think that'd be really, really cool. But no, like with this World Champion trophy, when he was on stage and he won and he, essentially, was the champion, it was handed to him and he stood on the podium and, in front of everyone, just held up. So it's like, it's kind of just a history piece at this point, and it's something that I'm going to put in the Pokemon Museum whenever that does come to fruition, which will hopefully be pretty cool. So right now I have a first place and a third place, and I'm looking for a second place to get the 3. So I think that'd be cool trifecta.
Yeah, it's very difficult to separate the trophies from the winners because in terms of reselling, the winners are usually more they're more willing to relinquish the cards themselves, just because when you have the trophy and then you actually have the card, I just think like in terms of how we've been conditioned as a society of actual physical trophies and medals, the winners generally try to hang on to the trophies, whereas you have the sellers. The market's basically telling them you have your David Pearsons who offer copious amounts of money for the actual cards themselves, and they're not as cool to show off. Personally, myself, cards on a display as an actual gigantic physical trophy. So getting someone to actually be able to sell you the trophy is really, really cool and really, really awesome. One of the cooler ones that I remember, you remember like the original KMX trophies?
Mm-hmm.
I think 149 Mont Blanc has the Charizard one. That statue is so incredible to see just basically on social media. It pops up once in a while. But that'd be like a grail thing to get, the Charizard K-Mix. I know the colors had the Blastoise one for a while that was on his eBay store. I'm pretty sure he sold it. But that's also not the one. I'm assuming there was probably third place was probably the Venusaur. I'm assuming.
I think what it was a Squirtle. I don't know if it might not have been Blastoise. I'm pretty sure it was a Squirtle.
It was a Squirtle, okay.
Yeah, and then I'm not sure what the second place would have been, but the Lizardon trophy,
Yeah.
It's such a cool. If we can find a picture, I think it'd be sick. But you literally have the Charizard, and it's like I mean, how can you go wrong with that? It's such a cool item.
One thing, I don't think he's ever gonna sell that thing, but I would be like fascinated to see how much that would fetch for. Like if you were to put a price on like the Lizardon trophy, what do you think in like an open market, how much it would sell for?
Oh, open market. I mean, looking off past recent sales and stuff, I mean, 40K minimum. I mean, because it's a Charizard, because people want it, because it's kind of one of the early ones. I mean, if you were to add premiums onto that, and like I'm trying to be realistic with auction values here. Like an auction takes 2. Like you can't, I think a private offer go higher, maybe get 150 out of it, maybe 120, but like I could see an auction going for like 70, 80, but I'd say 40 minimum, just based on like the current demand that went for the 2000 Sydney trophy, where the first place, the big thing, they had the Pika Cup in it for the Heritage auction. A lot of the other trophies go for, much less, I guess you could say. And the state and regional trophies, they're kind of the glass thing that are small. Those are like $100, $200 a lot of times. And you kind of, the TMB and the SSB and some of those like metals will go for like $2,000 or so. So as you sort of go up in tier, it's like you come down to kind of the base level. It's the prices are very, very different. Imagine getting a winner trophy from a big Pokemon tournament event for $100, and that's like the going rate. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, definitely cool. I love the fact that you bought something not a card. So that's awesome.
What do you think the Lizardon trophy would go for?
I'm with you. Probably at least I go minimum 1,000 on that. 100,000.
100. Okay. 100,000. I think you said 1,000. Yeah. I was like,
I'd buy that right now.
Yeah.
I'd say minimum 100,000. It's just so cool. Like the entire like the actual statue itself is really sweet. Like just to look at in person, and you don't even have to be like inside the hobby to understand it. You just think, oh, that's a really cool Charizard statue you got there, man. But lo and behold, you actually had to win it, and there's not a lot of them out there. my cards of the week, I brought three.
Three? Oh
Because
my!
I
Three
brought
cards.
three because I thought if I ever showed one of them, I will never show the other two again because they kind of go with each other. So we talked about the main topic of this week was grading. I like to theme my cards with like what we're talking about in the week. So we talked about like CGC and like different grading and like opening competition, then willingness to grade stuff. So I actually bought some stuff that are no longer graded by any company. You want to take a
Ooh.
guess?
I was going to say the legendary dogs earlier because I thought, maybe, but now if they're not being graded by any company, man, that's interesting. Is it some sort of test print or some sort of test like match print, something like
You
that?
got it. So
Oh,
I
really?
have,
Oh my
yeah, you
gosh.
got it. You got it.
Wow.
So because these were easy to get because I don't think there's like a huge market for them anymore. So they were not in the vault. I brought the match prints of
Ooh.
the original Johto starters, the final evolutions. I actually, yeah, they're not graded as you can probably tell. So they are in magnetic cases in the side of the perfect fit sleeves. So basically, match print Pokemon cards. They're in a really tough spot, basically, because, like I said, no grading company will actually
Let me,
authenticate them.
I think CGC will authenticate them now.
Oh,
I
really?
think they will because they have the match print on the back. So,
Okay. So basically, the reason why I didn't think because there was a bit of a hubbub a couple years ago where people proposed that it was actually fairly easy to replicate a match print card. So they have a normal. Basically, what these cards were, they were like color proofing for the final cards, and they actually have some watermark on the back that says basically a specific amount of things. I can't read it right now, but I'll post it right here. What it's supposed to say on the back of them. So there was a lot of hubbub about like how you could easily replicate these, and I can guarantee you these were not replicated because I bought them from the source themselves.
from
Big old
Rusty.
from TCA Gaming. Do you want to guess how much I paid for these?
Well, he was auctioning them off in batches, just going week after week. And it was sort of a time of the hobby where I remember everyone was kind of crunched for cash, I guess you could say. So I'm going to say you got them for $250 each.
So I bought I think the Meganium was the cheapest one. I got it for $85, and then
Oh my gosh.
I got the Typhlosion and the Feraligatr for like 125, and like the underbidder was actually former E4 moderator Marie Reina. So fellow Canadian, shout outs. So quite a steal, I think, in my personal opinion. This was like August 2018 prices, and I thought it just looked cool. I think my max bid was like $200 on them, and I just thought I like the fact that I got the complete trio set of all of them together. I think that's really cool. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. That the one that I kind of want is the match print Pichu because that is the last one that I am missing to complete the full on master set of the Expedition Pichu.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think I say
I'm
match
never
print set. I was like, oh my gosh.
no. So I'm missing the Pichu to complete the master set of that Expedition Pichu. I have all the other ones, the E3 one, the hole punch one, the sample one, reverse foil, hollow foil. Got them all. I will never get the match print one just because there's only two out there, and I'm pretty sure they are not going to be sold for anything that I'm willing to pay. But since you are a WotC expert, you want to give us the viewers a basic intro and kind of history of the match print cards.
Yeah, so the match print cards are essentially made to kind of help like the position testing or whatever you have for the actual sheets before they go through to kind of make sure everything's sort of aligned right. And you kind of have a full review before you actually go to the cutting process. And so again, they just have the top layer. So most Pokemon cards, when you look at them, you kind of have a front, a back, and you have a sort of a black sort of middle layer. In the middle of the match print are literally just the top layer. There's no other back or anything to it. Some match print cards are a little glossy on top, so there's a little extra texture if they've had like the sealant or if they've had anything sort of added to them. Then on the back, usually they'll say like match print. That's why they call them match print cards. So in kind of like a faded sort of white text that you can only see like at an angle. But it's one of the processes that happens before the cards actually go to the printing stage. So it's one of those steps. And if you got a full sheet, you cut it up. Or I'm assuming that because this came from a WotC employee, that they probably did go through that process. So I don't think I've ever seen an actual match print sheet. I think it's always just been the two sets. And so ultimately, Rusty had a full set. He had both sets. He bought them from the employee, and then he auctioned, one set off, and he kept the set. And I think as time went on, he may have, slowly let go of the second set that he did have. So that they do feel a little thin and flimsy in person. They don't feel like a normal card. But again, it's kind of like a prototype. It's kind of like a pre-release, kind of like a, before the cards actually, have their official printing.
Did the protos always, was it the same back?
There was one that was used for marketing purposes that had a white back. I've never actually held that card in person. I do know it was just one layer. It was kind of, it didn't have the full backing, I guess you'd say. Whether that said match from the back, I mean, that would make sense to me, but I don't want to commit to that without actually holding it.
All right. Last section of the podcast, Ask Nick and Zach viewer questions, where we take your viewer questions, mainly off YouTube. Basically, that's the majority of the time people are communicating us. But as always, you can communicate through Instagram, like any sort of post that we post on Instagram. You can slide into our DMs. I think our DMs are open if you want to send us a message through Instagram as well at NextGen_TCG. But so we have a repeat question from repeat customer from Stephen Kassoon. Do you think that we are heading into a prolonged bear market, i.e., the post-base boom of the early 2020s? This is your jam. You know this.
Take it.
You got this.
I think that the market is feeling very strong right now. Like, I don't feel like it's like taken off like a rocket ship or anything. I don't feel like it's weak. I don't feel like it's like at risk, I guess you could say. Like, I feel like we're at a really healthy spot. I am seeing, a lot of eBay things move. I am seeing a lot of private things move. I am seeing, orders from different people sort of tick up a bit. So all the indicators to me for like how I would judge a market are fairly like strong at this point. Like, I have nothing that seems like a risk or flying off. I do think kind of the modern booster box prices going down is kind of like a sign that, okay, maybe modern is turning. Maybe we are sort of going to hit a period where modern adjusts for how, easy it is to come by. The supply is just insane. But as far as like vintage and everything like that, we keep talking about how WotC's low, and it just doesn't really make sense compared to everything. Like, I think those prices are starting to, they have a foothold, they have a bottom, I don't feel like they're going to go down anymore. Again, not financial advice, but I feel like we're at a point where things are starting to flow in the hands of collectors, start to get tucked away. And once you see that supply on the market dwindle a little bit, that you kind of come to that crunch where it could pop up again. So again, not suggesting a major sort of punch here or there, but as far as like a bear market, I would say no. From JY Wong, any Discord groups you recommend for pokey investing chats? I think there's a lot of Discord groups out there. I think you kind of try to find people who kind of are similar minded as far as kind of what community you want to engage in. Obviously E4, I'm a moderator there. They pretty robust chat that kind of people pop in and out of all the time. I know Pokenomics, got to catch them. Old school. They all have a Discord that they put together that I think you have to pay for, that you get access to. But again, they do market data, trends. They kind of have a monthly sort of Q&A. They have an hourly, I think like a week, like kind of office hours type session thing. So there are some Discords out there that do provide some sort of service. But as far as like public, like free Discords, like E4 would be a good place to go. Then, start the dialogue there, or start a thread on E4, or say, hey, what Discords do you guys, engage with, just to kind of see. And, I've mentioned this before, like years ago, like I can only talk to so many people a day. You kind of have your people you kind of talk to more frequently than others. But those people, they talk to their own people too. You're kind of this hub and spoke. And so it's impossible to reach out and talk to everyone. And so these other kind of communities, those other kind of circles, they probably have their own Discords, this and that. And so by no means am I aware of all of them. But I would say kind of those two would be good for just Pokemon knowledge and pricing and things like that. Yeah, I can like look through my Discords right now. Like, I mean, Squeaks Game World has a great Discord on Modern. He loves Modern, this and that. He kind of does some older stuff too. He'll hop in voice chat here and there. So similar to Danny Phantom, I think Squeaks and Danny Phantom are kind of similar as far as like their approach and sort of how they tie to the hobby. I'm in an Elite Errors Collectors Discord where we just talk about error cards all day, and we have an error card pass off sort of stream where if one of us finds an error card we don't want, we put in there, and then I just go on eBay and click buy now. And so a lot of times I pick up an error card. It's just that way. There's a few Discords I can't name because of what their names are. I'm going to Pokemon Go Discord just to kind of figure out where the cool stops are.
What would you be least willing to share on a screenshot publicly? The Discord groups that you're part of, or your internet browser bookmarks?
I mean, I keep a very clean search history on the internet. I used to, when I was doing a PSA, I had a grade video. Like I typed P into the browser, and everyone was like, "Oh, you're a risky man." Typing in the PSA website and browser. Like, hey, I have nothing to hide, man. When I lived in Chicago, I had floor to ceiling windows. I never shut my blinds. So people can see whatever they want to see. It's like I think if you live life in secrecy, I think sometimes you get all fearful in this. But if you live an open life and just kind of, there's nothing to hide. Be proud of who you are.
Secretly, Zach, the reason he's not afraid because anytime he opens a browser that he doesn't want anyone else seeing, he's incognito and on a VPN.
hey, don't give out the secrets here. One more Discord is TCG Fish, Data Analytics. They have like a deal section where they track like eBay deals, like to market price and stuff. So I'd recommend that one as well.
Okay. So next question comes from Mr. Guitar Freak 132. What do you think of the Pokemon stamp promos? Do you see those doing well long term? There seem to be a lot printed, and the demand is higher because of how unique and interesting the Pikachu cards are. So just brief history on those cards. So these were a set of 2 cards that came in a box, part of the S-P collection, I'm pretty sure, for Japanese promos. And basically the only way, because it's Japan and they do an awesome job of doing promos, which we struggle with over here in North America, how you got these was actually at post offices. You can either go to a post office in person, or you can order from the Japanese post office online. And the highlight of the set is that you got 2 cards. One of them was water bird, a modern day bird. I think it's called Cramorant or something. I don't know the phonetic pronunciation of that. But you also got a beautiful full art card of a Pikachu on the back of a female girl wearing a kimono. Fantastic artwork, beautiful. So that was basically the only way to get it. But like this person said, there were a lot of them. Zach, do you want to take a guess of how many PSA 10s are in that pop report?
5,000?
No.
More? Oh man, 8,000?
Lower.
6,500.
Higher.
7,200.
70. As I checked this morning, the pop report was 7,100, 992.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
For a card that came out I think it came out in 2021. Or something around those lines.
But there was another sort of issue with this product, with the stamp item. Like they could break down the product, they could ship the cards, but to actually get the full complete box with the stamp in there was like illegal or something, because they couldn't like export their stamp, or there was some sort of like legality thing to it. Whereas like, and Japanese are very, by the book. They do things the right way. They don't, go against culture. They don't go against sort of the laws. Like they're very, obedient society. And so like to, for someone to ship that would be them, doing the wrong thing. So to get a full sealed one is actually very difficult to obtain. So the next question up here, Proper Crow. What are the odds that the J Balvin, Katy Perry, Post Malone card ever make to the market? The 3 of them are very wealthy. So I assume there's little, if any, financial incentive for them to sell. Charity possibly. And I think you hit it right on the head there. Charity is probably going to be one of the only ways these come out, if they did some sort of auction, this or that, to kind of support a cause. Supporting causes is something that a lot of celebrities will do. There's some times where it's difficult to obtain a card because someone never really wants to let it go, such as the Pikachu trophy or something. There's some sort of tie to it. So a lot of times in those scenarios, what you have to do is you have to find something that they want more. You have to find something that they may be willing to trade for. And so, not everything is obtainable. We've talked about cards in the past where no amount of money will sort of make these cards come up. The one-on-one, trainers with the person's face and stuff on there, like the person who owns that could decide they don't want to sell. And, it's the same scenario here. And so what I would say is to figure out what these people may want more. And that might be a way you could do a trade of some sort. So that's going to be a real challenge, because again, the financial barriers do not exist for these people.
Do you want to give just a brief history of these cards and why they were issued to these people? I know we obviously know just from name value understand all these people who all these people are, but you kind of just want to give like a brief history of them.
Yeah, so Pokemon partnered with each of these, individuals, to do a song of some sort. So Katy Perry, Post Malone, obviously, they did kind of a live stream sort of thing for Pokemon, and what they did is they issued a one-on-one sort of card, with them on the card, assuming that they were handed to that person. Now, are there extra copies? You would think, the person printing those is probably like, I'd love a Post Malone card too. Let me throw it in my binder. You open up HR's binder and it's just nothing but all the good stuff that he's been tucking away over the years. And so sort of as a appreciation sort of for the partnership and them doing something for Pokemon, they issued this kind of cool card. Now, why they didn't make it a promo and give it to the masses, because everyone would have loved to have had a Post Malone or Katy Perry card, I don't know, but they made a 101, and it's basically kind of a full art, kind of like the Ishihara GX, except that card has 100 copies. This card has 1.
Does that take away like its resale value, knowing that it's an extra card?
I think they still go for quite a bit. I mean, the trophies that are the extras still go for quite a bit. Some of the other cards that have surfaced, like the Art Academies, where we know that the person who owned them never sold any. The one that did pop up went for quite a bit. And so I think if there was an extra copy, I think it would go for a lot. Now, if you compare it, I mean, because it is a 101, it's not really a 101 if it's an extra copy, but I don't know, maybe they're a huge Katy Perry fan or Post Malone fan, or, because you kind of get into these other sort of industries, these other markets where your buyer may not be the typical buyer. It may be someone else who values it differently than, say, Ishihara GX from probably a Pokemon collector.
All right. So last question for this week's podcast comes from Shug Nasty. That's
a sick name, man.
That's a sick name. It's almost the sickest gem in Pokemon. So thoughts on the early Japanese non-TCG sets. Cardass, Topsun. To me, these cards look great and are low pop, difficult to grade. However, the card prices don't seem to reflect the prices. I'm going to add another group of cards to that list as well. That is the Topps Chrome set, which includes like 3 different variants in the box. So you have the Spectra, the Sparkle, as well as the Techno special holofoils of those cards. I'll let you start and then I'll jump in.
I feel like it was like Anchorman there for a second. You just read everything that comes off. I was listening. I was like, is this your opinion? This idea? Is that the question? And so if you have a question, you put it in there next time. It just comes right out. Thank you, San Diego. Now, the weird part about these sets is they've always been so available. Like so available. I'm talking complete card assets, complete Topsun sets, $100 on eBay. Blue back, no numbers. The considered to be, the sort of first iteration of Topsun. Before the blue backs with the numbers, going for $5, $10. Just buy it now, sitting up there. And so the weird part is, for years, like no one really wanted these, or they were not that desirable. There were people that completed them, collected them. You got the kind of the holofoils with the blue back and green back, the variants. Like those are always kind of cool that people sort of stoked away, and they always had some sort of price, sort of premium to them. And they were hard to pull because you couldn't find any sealed. But outside of that, it's just like, you see the Cardass Charizard go for $30K, and you see these big prices and stuff. It kind of blows my mind, because it's like when they were free, basically, it's like the desirability wasn't there. And so, I've been at card shows like the National before, and, people, and I'm just sitting there talking to like Mealy Pops or someone, and then people come up and they're like, hey, I want to sell this greenback card for $1,000. It's like, hey, but you think it's a good deal? And I'm like, dude, like last year card was $1. Like, it's like, don't give them $1,000. So I still have this like weird perspective in my head, an image where it's like, I know there's people out there that just probably have a ton of it that still think they're worthless, just sitting in a storage unit, like tucked away, that they haven't even brought them out yet. Same as Vending Series, which actually has unique artwork and stuff that is kind of tied into other things. It just feels very weird to me that these go for so much money when the history just doesn't sort of support that.
Yeah, like Zach said, you can literally buy complete collections of all these cards, especially if you go straight to the source. If you import them from Japan, there are like so many listings of just complete like binder collection of these. Obviously, you have differing degrees of condition, but I think those cards especially they lend very well to seeing them in a binder. They have such unique artwork. I have bought a couple of the Bandai Cardass ones, just because we all live in a budget. We don't want to have addiction and FOMO and all that type of stuff. So when I get interested in like a set, generally my philosophy of what I like to do is I prioritize exactly what cards of the set that I want the most. So I think from Card House, the Bandai set, I have the Charizard, I have the Mewtwo, and I have the Mew. The Mew is one of the most cutest cards that exists in the hobby. One of the cutest Mews that exists in the hobby. Picked it up, I think, for like a couple $100 from like a Japan International Trade auction. I think that's card's like $2,000 right now. But the Charizard is obviously a big one. You buy the most, so typical, buy the most expensive thing first, and then buy all the other stuff that you like, because the stuff that's the most expensive will always be the most expensive card in that entire set. That's my general advice for you. Obviously, we have, in terms of English, we have Topps Chrome. You want to touch on your experience with Topps Chrome and basically how this set played out?
Yeah, and so the weird part about Topps Chrome is it's not like, to me, it's not like a TCG. It's not a trading card game. Like there's no attack, defense. It's not. I think there may be something you can do with it to play, but like I guess technically it is a TCG. But it's like it's that weird thing where it's like an image or a movie thing. It's like if you just take a screenshot of a movie, it feels weird. But Topps Chrome actually is kind of a premium product. It's not like the typical like Top Series 1, 2, 3 or those sets, or like the Advanced Challenge set, I guess you'd say. And so when it comes to like collecting that set, I always thought they were kind of cool, but I didn't think that they should price the same as like WotC. Like I always thought it'd be kind of cool to build a set of those. I remember passing on a deal in 2018 where it was like $700, and it was like the majority of the Techno set just listed on eBay. I think it was like 80% complete or something. I was like, that's kind of a good deal. I'd probably pick that up. Someone else picked it up, and I think they sold them you in that for $5,000, like, a couple of years later. So it's nuts how all that stuff happens. But the markets on some of those are kind of thin because the prices are so high on like the Spectra, Sparkle, Techno. Like I'm talking like several thousands of dollars, like I said, for the Mew and, for other cards in the set, that I kind of determined myself that if I were to enter that market and compete, I would just go broke, because it's hard to compete with kind of the 3 or 4 players that want to complete their own sets. So my strategy to collect actually Topps Chrome and that is to wait for someone else to complete a set, let them put it up at auction, and then just buy the set from them, once it is complete, rather than drive up the individual card prices, throughout. I've always thought that would be the best way to build that set.
Pretty safely say the highlight of that entire set would be the Techno Charizard in terms of actual dollar value. I remember when Mason was really trying to like hype up the set for various reasons. Our good friend Campy Cards that we love in the hobby, his selling point is that in terms of like a Charizard, you could actually pull out of a set. The Techno Charizard, in terms of odds, was like the lowest Charizard, or like the lowest rate Charizard that you could possibly pull, which I think is true based on the pull rates I saw posted online.
Yeah, maybe. They did the Series 1. That was the first. I think it might have been 75 cards. I'm not sure. Maybe it was 74. But then they had a Top Series 2 where they did kind of the rest of the cards through 151 that included Mew. But the Series 2 is much more rare, much more hard to find. It's nearly impossible to sort of find. And I remember someone did a box break of Topps Chrome Series 2 the other day, and it was like the packs, I think, were like $1,000 each or something. Because like I said, that back half, that includes like the Gyarados, the Articuno, the Eevees. It includes sort of that second, what have you. Like anytime you see a Topps Chrome Series 2, like Sparkle or Techno, like I would just think like those are going to be harder to find, because you're just not going to find the packs. Where Series 1, I feel like it was maybe printed more, or like it just seems like there's always more of it around. Like I don't know any details about print numbers. It just feels like it's always been more available. And that does include the Blastoise, the Charizard, the Venusaur, the starters. So it just kind of keep that in mind when you are buying Topps, that the first 75 maybe a little cheaper. The second 75, if there's a premium, like I think it's more justifiable.
Correction, Series 1, 78.
78. Oh, we're both wrong.
Not 74, 78. I'm on Bubblepedia. Right? Yeah, it ended at Rapidash for Series 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
So one question that was missed in last week's episode that I was called out for was the Green Shiz. He called me out for a question he had. So it's last and certainly least on the questions here. Is he said, would you exchange all your PSA 10s for the pristine 10 collection CGC with the gold labels? And I mean, like, you have to say yes. I mean, it's literally to me it's a stricter scale, this and that. And so I think a PSA did come out with like a perfect grade or like a pristine grade or something that was a little stronger, more rigid than the 10. But if you look at literally the grading scales between the two, like the Pristine 10, I think is around an 8% rate, and the PSA 10 is around a 40% rate. And so again, the more stricter, stronger cards, of course, I'd love to have the stronger cards. And, they are two different grading companies, but Josh, I'll give you that, that peace of mind there for the shots fired.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the close of episode 8 of the Next Gen TCG podcast. Zach is literally in 4 hours about to hop on a plane. But because we got this this video recorded early, then hopefully we can meet our kind of soft launch dates of Wednesdays/Thursdays. So hopefully this will be up on Wednesday. And as always, if you want to leave your viewer questions for the next week's Ask Nick and Zach question, Zach might actually not be in his home office. He might be someplace else traveling. Where in the World is Zach is a game that we will constantly be playing all the time.
Yeah, if you guys are in Chicago, if you're going to the National, shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm happy to meet up. I'll be walking on the floor. Hopefully just building relationships, talking to people, checking out what's there, and we'll report back to you guys in episode 9 of this week coming up. So see you guys soon.
See you guys soon.
I forgot your question.
basically, I wanted to know.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Can we take a break? I was just like mind dead.